Hello friends, how's it going? It's me, Betty Jean. In today's video, we are doing our monthly reading wrap up, get ready with me type video. I did my first one of these last month and I had such a blast filming it. And I know this isn't gonna be like the most popular type of video on my channel, but those of you who watched it, thank you so much, and I appreciated it, and I loved hearing your comments. It was so fun reading like what you were reading and your thoughts on the things that I read, and it just felt like such a cute, tight little community just talking about books, and it made my whole life. So just thank you so much, and I fully intend on keeping up with this series until further notice. So it is now May. This is my April reading wrap up. These are all 12 books that I read in the month of April, and I am so excited to talk about them and gush about them and share them with you. I loved everything that I read this month except for one thing, which I will talk about later. And I'm just excited to hear your thoughts and hear what you've been reading, hear what you're excited to read. It's gonna be a good time. Before we get into it, my accessory details, these plugs are, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on where these are from. I think these are Love Kills Boutique. This is just a basic choker. I don't know where it's from. I'm so obsessed with my Katmere Academy crew neck from the Crave series that I got off of Etsy. I just think it's so cute and fitting for this video. So yeah, without further ado, this is gonna be a long one like last time, so let's just dive in and do our makeup and chat about books. Hi friends, good morning. I don't know if it's morning for you, but it's morning for me. It is Monday morning, May 1st. We're gonna do my reading wrap up while I do my makeup and get ready for the day. What am I getting ready for, you ask? Absolutely nothing. I'm off today. My uterus is set to attack any time now, so we're just doing makeup just for the fun of it today. I did already prime before I did my brows. As always, I like my primer to sink into the skin while I do that step. Using the Rich Bitch primer as I've been using. I'm gonna start with this Say Glowy Super Gel in Star Glow. I've been using this the last week ever since I bought it at the Sephora sale. It's just like a glowy, lovely serum-y type thing. And I've loved using this kind of in between primer and before I go in with everything else. It's just, I don't know, it's hydrating and luminous, and I am obsessed with this. I'm glad I bought the mini because I didn't know if I'd like it, but now I kind of wish I bought the full size, but we'll see how I feel when I run through it. Okay, as usual, if I don't mention a makeup product now going forward, it'll all be listed down below. I'm using pretty much all things I've used before, besides that Say product I don't think I've used on camera yet. So yeah, let's just get into it. I read 12 books in the month of April. Honestly, I'm shocked that I did, mostly just because in the month of March, I read 13, and this last month I read many more like bigger books. So I'm surprised that I even came close to what I read the month prior. But yeah, I read 12 books. Well, actually, technically I read 11 and a half. I did DNF one about 50% of the way through, but I will get to that later. But just for the sake of ease, I'm just gonna say I read 12 books. So what took over the first part of my month was the Crave series. I did actually read the first Crave book in March, so I already chatted about that last month. But I'll give a quick rundown before we jump into the first four. I am gonna still try my best to avoid spoilers and be fairly vague because I really enjoyed unfolding the story myself without knowing certain things. So I'm gonna be as vague as possible and maybe not mention certain things. I'll let you know if there's a spoiler. I'll let you know. But basically, first book takes place at Katmere Academy. It's told through Grace's perspective. She is a senior in high school, almost done with school. She is moving there pretty unexpectedly because her parents passed away and her uncle like runs the school, and her cousin Macy goes to school there. But basically she's just learning all this crazy stuff that she didn't know existed before. Vampires, other creatures and magical beings, and just kind of what goes down at this school. It was a really fun first book, and I enjoyed going through that journey. So that's just kind of the premise. If you have not read at least the first Crave book, just be prepared for minor spoilers of the first book in my next discussion. I'm gonna try to keep the next four spoiler free, but I might reference things from the first book that would spoil things in the first book, if that makes sense. But nothing major. I'm gonna try my best to keep it as light as possible while still giving my thoughts. The first thing I read in April was the second Crave book, Crush. I loved that one. That was my favorite one of the entire series. I thought it was so good. It was so super funny. Minor spoiler for the end of the first book, but honestly, I got spoiled on this ending of the first book and it didn't like ruin the book at all for me, but minor spoiler on the ending of the first book. The book ends with Grace basically turning into a gargoyle. Jackson's brother Hudson in the past that you learn in the first book was basically a not so great person in Jackson's retelling, and Jackson ended up having to kill his brother in order to save the world in a sense. So the book ends with Hudson actually kind of reappearing, being brought back and aiming to seek his revenge on Jackson. Grace wants to protect Jackson, so she ends up unknowingly at the time turning into a gargoyle to protect him, save herself, all that stuff. And it wasn't like her own choosing, like she didn't even know she could do that. So that's where the first book ends, and that's where it immediately picks up in the second book. It picks up with her waking up 4 months later, not knowing what happened at all, just going about her day like nothing had changed, and everyone's having to explain to her like, you realize this happened to you, right? So a lot of the second book is dealing with her kind of figuring out her gargoyle-ness and how to work with that. And not to mention, when she turned into a gargoyle, she also brought Hudson with her. He is now stuck like in her mind. He is just constantly there giving his internal dialogue to everything that's going on in her life. Nobody else can hear Hudson, but she can hear him all the time. And it's so funny. I love the banter between them. I love just watching the relationship kind of morph and change, and you learn a lot more about Hudson and just kind of like what really happened with what Jackson had told you in the first book and stuff like that. It was really, really interesting. There's this big like sporty type tournament that takes place in the book as well, so that's really fun to like kind of go through all the students practicing and things like that. There's more drama with like the higher ups as well, especially with the fact that not only can Grace turn into a gargoyle, she is the first gargoyle to be around in 1,000 years. So this is like a big deal to everybody. So it was fun to read through. It was, again, my favorite one of the series. I just thought it was so funny. I loved the banter between Hudson and Grace. I loved his internal snarky comments. It was a blast to read. Moving on now to the third book, Covet. This one was a little heavier on the, adventure, I guess, so to speak. There's a lot going on with this one. At this point in the series, we are journeying through what the different Katmere Academy students are doing. Again, I want to keep it vague because I don't want to spoil things from previous books. So if I'm not explaining a lot, it's because I don't want to like ruin certain things, because there's things that happen in the second book that's set up for the third book. Basically, in my opinion, this one was very like adventure, very questy. There were different things that the students had to acquire. Grace is navigating her gargoyle form, navigating her mating bond with her mates and all the things, and it was just really fun. I liked the quests. I liked the different kind of creatures that they encounter. We learn a lot more about just the internal stuff that goes on in this non-human world, how like even their prison and justice system goes. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed that one. I feel like it gave just a lot more insight to how the world itself works, and I found it really fun to read through. Moving on next, I know I barely talked about that one, but I don't want to spoil things, but moving on next is Court. This one is the fourth book, obviously. This one is heavily setting up for war, which honestly, war is hinted at even in the first book, that like there's just lots of power things going on, and this book is really like mostly setting up for war and kind of going through all that. It was very time travel-y and very questy, but in an even more intense way. Honestly, this one, I don't want to say it was my least favorite because it's not like I didn't like it. I did enjoy this book. It was just very dense. Even though this series in general is very YA fantasy, that one specifically was very, very dense with the setting and just all the little details. I feel like there were times that my mind was kind of skipping around the pages a little bit just because it was very descriptive focused rather than dialogue focused, and I'm a girl who likes to read a lot of dialogue. But again, it wasn't a bad book. It was dense. I swear the font was smaller in this book. It's the biggest one. It was a little bit of a heftier read compared to some of the other ones, but it was really, really good. Again, you're getting a lot of insight as to how the political unrest is going. You're learning more about different characters. And it was really good. It sets up for a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in the 6th book. I know, not the 5th book. I'll get to that. The 6th book comes out later in May, actually, and I'm really excited. Oh, I should have pre-ordered that. Barnes & Noble had a sale recently where if you pre-order books, you get like a discount. And I pre-ordered some that I knew I'd want to read later this year. Totally forgot about that one. Oh well, I will buy that one eventually. I'll be on vacation when it launches, but I'll probably buy it when I return. So I probably won't get around reading that until either the last couple days in May or in June. So I'll talk about that one eventually. But yeah, this one is just setting up for all that, the war, all the things. It was really good. It was really intense. I liked all the different situations I had to go through and just learning more about even Grace's background, like more about her family history and stuff. It was really interesting. Then my second favorite book of the series was the 5th one, Charm. I actually didn't know what this one was about until it was my time to read it, because I didn't read the synopsises of all the books like in sequence. I kind of did them one at a time. But this one actually takes place during that time period that Hudson and Grace are trapped in each other's minds when she's in her gargoyle form in between the 1st and 2nd book. It was so good. At different points throughout the other books, it's alluded that even though it was 4 months in real life time, it was actually much longer in like their reality. And I loved this. Again, like I said, I loved the 2nd book. I loved the banter between Hudson and Grace. And I was so happy to have more of that with Charm. It was super fantastical, lots of weird worlds that they're kind of traveling through and the banter between them, and again, different characters. And this one does actually set up for the final book as well, because they visit a realm that they're going to end up having to visit in the 6th book as well. They allude to that at the end of the 4th one, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. If I had to rank them, I'd probably say the 2nd one, Crush, was my favorite. The 5th one, Charmed, was my 2nd favorite. The 1st one was probably my 3rd favorite, just like a good, nice intro book. My 4th favorite was the 3rd book, Covet. And my last favorite was Court. But again, I didn't not enjoy Court. It was just very dense. It wasn't as light and easy breezy of a read, but really enjoyed that series. It took up quite a good chunk of time. Honestly, I think I read the entire series in 2 weeks. I busted through it, but it consumed a lot of my life, and I'm excited to eventually get my hands on the final book and read it. As a whole, I gave this series probably a good, like, solid 4 stars, ranging anywhere between 4 to 4.5, depending on the book itself. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I have my Catmere Academy crew neck that I got off of Etsy because of these books. And overall, I really enjoyed them. It was a very fun series to go through. And if you like fantasy stuff, I'd recommend it. I thought it was fun. Again, it is on the YA side. It's not like super spicy or anything like that, but it was really fun to go through. I don't know what blush I want to do today. I think I'll do one of the glowy blushes from Lethal. Actually, I think I want to do this one because I haven't used that one yet. It's called Pansy. I haven't worn this one in particular yet, so let's give that one a go today. But then, after I finished the Crave series, I wanted something very easy breezy, lighthearted, silly rom-com. So I picked up Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. Very YA rom-com. It was exactly what I needed. It is very predictable. It's very like enemies to lovers meets fake dating. I love a fake dating trope. I actually enjoy enemies to lovers as well, as long as it's not like too toxic or anything. Oh my gosh, that's so much more pigmented than I realized. I was busy talking to you. I wasn't even looking at what was happening. I'll blend it all together. Don't you worry your pretty little head. But it was super cute. The story is through Liz's perspective, and her neighbor, Wes, is basically super annoying. He's always kind of like tormented her in like a annoying next door neighbor type of way, not in like a bullying kind of way. They are seniors in high school, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And basically, Liz is obsessed with rom-coms. It's her favorite thing in the world. It's what her and her mom, before her mom passed, grew up watching together. It's just like her favorite thing ever. And she craves that typical dreamy love story for herself. Holy cow, this is a very pigmented blush. I'm like barely tapping in, and it is just insane. But that's what she wants for herself. She fantasizes about love. She is constantly making soundtracks to events in her life. She is just a hopeless romantic, and it is so adorable. And then one day at school, Michael, who was an old friend of their like little friend group in the neighborhood, rejoins school. He'd moved away for a long time and he's back, and she just immediately thinks like, this is fate. We were supposed to be together. We were supposed to meet again. And she wants him to notice her. She realizes he's kind of buddy-buddy again with Wes since rejoining the school. So she kind of goes to Wes, which is the annoying neighbor, for like a proposition. Like, hey, can you like invite me to things that you guys are all gonna be at so I can get to know him more? He begrudgingly agrees, mostly because they stake a parking spot in front of their houses as the wager, and he would love that parking spot. So she starts joining in. Honestly, Michael kind of thinks they're into each other, even though they keep like completely disputing that. They're like, no, we're absolutely not. But then, as you would expect, things start to blossom between Liz and Wes. And it was just so wholesome and wonderful. It was goofy and cheesy and exactly what I needed. Obviously, if you want like depth and seriousness and, I don't know, not cheesy, you would hate that book. But sometimes you just need a cheesy, easy breezy rom-com. And it made me really happy. This is such an intense blush and I love it so much. I do feel like I need a little more bronzer, at least on my forehead, to balance some colors out. Just a smidgen more. Moving on to my DNF, I started A Whole New World by Liz Braswell. It's a twisted Disney tale. I got this as a birthday gift years ago from a friend actually, and that was during my time period where I didn't read very much. But since it was on my shelf, I was like, I should go ahead and read this. And there's a bunch of those twisted tale kind of books. So I was like, maybe I'll love this and then I'll have so many more books to read from this like lineup. Unfortunately, didn't love it. I got halfway through. I was gonna push through and finish the whole thing, but I was honestly worried that if I pushed through and kept reading, I wasn't gonna wanna read ever again because I was just dreadfully bored of it. It's through Aladdin's perspective and it starts out the exact same way the movie starts out. He's stealing bread, guards are chasing him, Jasmine pops up, she accidentally steals something to give to a poor kid, all that stuff. Jafar has Aladdin locked away, wants him to get the lamp, yada yada yada, and the whole thing is, it's like, what would have happened if Jafar got the lamp after the Cave of Wonders instead of Aladdin having the lamp? And it's just kind of, I mean, obviously I didn't read the whole thing, but from what I understand and what I read up to, it's basically how are we gonna stop Jafar from taking over, getting him dethroned, all that good stuff. I just felt very bored. I knew it wasn't gonna be super deep. I knew that it was very young. It wasn't gonna be anything super crazy, but it was just, it could have been so much better in my opinion. It was so cheesy and it just didn't hit. If you love those books, I am not judging you by any means. It just didn't hit for what I was hoping for. And also I feel like if you're gonna do a twisted tale on like a Disney thing, I want a little more difference in the story. Like I really didn't like that it started out the exact same way as the movie, like to a T, like even to the dialogue, like it was exactly the same. And after this one, halfway through, unfortunately, I wanted to love it. It was boring and I didn't love it. Didn't love it, but again, if you loved it, I'm so happy for you because I really wanted to love it. Oh, by the way, better than the movies. I think I gave a solid like, I would have given it like a 3.5 stars. On Goodreads, I think I gave it a 3 because you can't do halves, but about a solid 3.5 stars. This one I just didn't rate at all since I didn't finish it. But moving on to my 5-star read of the month, I love this. It's a bigger book. It's like 500 something pages. I read this in like a day and a half. This is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I loved this. I loved it so much. The descriptions of the different characters were so on point. I felt like I knew them. I liked that I knew so much about all the characters, like not just the main characters, but the side characters as well. The town was descriptive in the best possible way because it wasn't like so overly descriptive that I found myself getting bored. But I just felt like I lived there. Like I felt like I could picture everything. I want to visit the town of Knockemout so bad. It is just so cute. I believe it was in Virginia and it seemed so pure. I loved that town. I loved the characters. It takes place through Naomi's perspective and a little bit of Knox's perspective, but mostly Naomi's perspective. The story starts out with her traveling to the town of Knockemout. She has just fled her wedding because her twin sister, her evil twin sister, so to speak, calls her for help. She rushes away from her wedding to go help. Immediately, everyone in the town that she's encountering is on edge because they do not get along with her sister. Tina is just not a great person. She is constantly causing problems and fights and criminal activity and all the things that you don't really want to deal with at your establishment. But of course she's convincing everyone like, I'm not Tina, I'm Naomi, hello, nice to meet ya. And she runs into Knox then as well, who's also like super awful. It's like super rude. He did not like Tina at all, and he immediately mistakes Naomi for Tina. They're immediately turned off from each other, and that's kind of where the story starts. My face is done, and we will move on to the eyes. I think I'm gonna do something fairly simple on the eyes, honestly. I'm just gonna do kind of a wash of color over the lid, maybe a sparkly, smoky situation on the lower lash line, and then a wing, because I really want to use this because it'll match my shirt nicely. But I'm going to be using my Lethal Cosmetics Wildflower palette for when I do color. I think my lid, though, is just going to be that shade smeared everywhere. This story is kind of like not really enemies to lovers, because it's not like Naomi and Knox were enemies. They just didn't really care for each other right off the bat because they just got bad first impressions of each other. But it's more so like grumpy sunshine trope. Like, she is sunshine, happy, optimistic, super full of energy and life, and Knox is just such a grumpy dude. He is super pessimistic, pretty much only cares about just his normal routine. He doesn't open up to people. He owns a barber shop and a bar in his town, and I mean, he's friendly enough with people, but he just doesn't have like those deep, deep connections, you know what I mean? But continuing on, Naomi is going to help her sister Tina. Tina's nowhere to be found, but what is there is a niece that she never knew about. She's like 11 or 12, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Her name is Waylay. Never heard that name before in my life. And I don't normally like children in books, but she was so cute. She's so funny and sassy. And I really felt for her in the fact that she's kind of dealt with her mom's like craziness her entire life and kind of learning how to fend for herself and stuff. I loved watching the relationship grow between Naomi and Waylay, a nice aunt-niece relationship. It was super pure. And basically you're just kind of going through the story of all their relationships between all the different people in the town, all the different friends that Naomi's meeting. You're watching all these relationships blossom. You're watching her and Knox's relationship blossom, which I was obsessed with. You're dealing with the drama of Tina's stuff and like, where did she go? What is she up to? Is she coming back? Because Naomi also like quickly realizes she wants to be completely responsible for Waylay. She doesn't want her to have to be under Tina's authority anymore because she's clearly not parent of the year. And I just loved the story unfolding. It was so, so good. I already bought the second book. I'm gonna start reading it soon. It's through Nash's perspective, which is Knox's brother, and then his love interest, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but you get introduced to her at the end of the book. And I am just so obsessed with that town and the characters, and I cannot wait to have more. Again, I gave this a solid 5 stars. It was a pretty easy read. It made me so happy. I loved being in that world, and it brought me so much joy. I hope they eventually make like a movie out of it, because that would be so fun. I'm gonna start just smoking out my lower lash line and my waterline area with my black liner, and then we'll talk about another book. Just want to get that nice and blendy before I pause to pick up the next book, which I loved. So the next book I read was Cold Clay by Juno Black. I read the first Shady Hollow book last month and I loved it. It was so cute. These are like wholesome, cozy murder mystery books. They take place in the town of Shady Hollow, and all the characters in the book are animals. It's just so cute. Think Fantastic Mr. Fox vibes. Like, they're all doing regular like human things. Like oops, I got liner on my lid. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. They're living their normal like human-y things. Like, they live in their little town and they have their little houses and they have their little jobs and their little personalities, and it's so cute. Just like the first book, it takes place through Vera Vixen's perspective. She is a fox and she's like an investigative reporter. She helped solve the first murder mystery in the first book, which was really the first murder mystery in their whole town. And now there's another one happening. The first book took place during the, what season did it take place in? I want to say during like the summer. Now it's autumn in this book. It's just so cozy. There's a moose that owns the coffee shop in town called Joe Muggs. His name is Joe, obviously. And a long time ago, like well before Vera even moved to the town of Shady Hollow, his wife kind of ran out on him and his son. She just packed her bags, left, never to be seen or heard from again. And that was kind of the end of that. Until at the Cold Clay Orchard, a body is discovered and they identify it as a moose, and they realize that it was his wife's body the whole time. She didn't even run out, she got murdered. So it's basically just going through the whole story of who done it, what happened, what's the truth. I loved it. It's so cozy. It's such an easy read. Like these are only like 200 pages long. Yeah, like barely over 200 pages long. It's just such a cozy, easy book. I love the covers of these so much. I mean, I initially bought the first Shady Hollow book because I judge a book by its cover, and it very much appealed to me. And I have the third one, and I'm very excited about it. I'll probably read it. I actually might read it next. I might read it next. I feel like I want just like a quick, easy, wholesome murder mystery. I love those books. I think they're so precious. I feel like in general, I give these probably a solid like 3.5 stars, because I'm not like so obsessed with them that they're like my favorite books of all time. Like I don't think I could give them like a 4, 4.5, or 5 star, but a good 3.5. I really enjoy them. I think they're fun. I think they're cozy. And just a nice, easy, wholesome book. I might put some shimmer on the lower lash line, but for now I'm actually kind of just vibing with this. So we're gonna move on to the next one while I do my liner, which was another Lynn Painter book I really liked better than the movie, so I wanted to read another one. This is Mr. Wrong Number. This one was so funny. This one's more adult than YA. It's not the spiciest adult rom-com I've read, like nowhere near as spicy as Things We Never Got Over, but it had a lot more spice to it than Better Than the Movies. Like clearly not a strictly YA book. But our main character is Olivia Marshall. She is super prone to bad luck. The story kind of starts out with her moving in with her brother and his roommate Colin because she accidentally burned her apartment building down. She went through a really bad breakup where her ex cheated on her with a coworker and basically decided she did not need to be a part of his life in any way anymore. So she was burning his love notes, accidentally burns her apartment building down. It's a whole thing. So she moves in with her brother because now she has nothing. She also had just gotten fired from her job. So it's just like the epitome of rock bottom. And then one evening she gets a random "what are you wearing" type text from a unknown number. And she kind of messes with him. They start bantering back and forth and then have a laugh over the fact that he texted the wrong number. And then throughout their days, they just will randomly text each other, just like random banter, silly thoughts, silly things like that. She refers to him as Mr. Wrong Number. He refers to her as Miss Misdial. And then this part's on the back of the book, so it's not a spoiler, but I'll be honest, I'd forgotten what the back of the book said when I got around to reading this, so it was like news to me, but it's so fun. Well, it turns out Colin, the roommate of her brother who she's staying with, was Mr. Wrong Number, and she is his Miss Misdial. He finds out first. She doesn't know for a very long time. And he doesn't really know what to do with the information because really they weren't getting along. I mean, he's always just thought of her as like the annoying younger sister to his best friend kind of thing. But he really grew to like Miss Misdial because they had just deeper conversations. They thought each other was funny. But once he realizes it's her, he's like, I don't want to take advantage of this situation anymore, which I very much respected. Really like that liner. I think that is so pretty. This is from AF94, by the way, in the shade Casino. Really like that. So really the story is just this silly rom-com navigating like what to do. Like, do we still form a relationship? Do we not? It's a whole thing. And I just really enjoyed it. It's very much the brother's best friend kind of trope, and it was just so pure. Very easy, silly read. I bought another one, The Love Wager, which I believe is through her brother's perspective with his love interest. So I'm really looking forward to reading that one at some point over the next month. I think it's gonna be really good. I just love a silly, easy rom-com. It makes my whole day. I'm just gonna do this other wing really quick, and then we'll talk about the last series that I read for the month. Okay, moving on. Let's throw some shimmer everywhere while I talk about my last series that I read, which was the Witches of Thistle Grove series. We have the first one, Payback's a Witch, the second one, From Bad to Cursed, and the final one, Back in a Spell, which I technically finished this morning. So I guess I didn't fully read this one in the month of April, but I only had a tiny bit left and I was ready to go to bed last night. So I read it first thing this morning, so I'm counting it. But this series was really fun. I was intrigued by this. I've actually been wanting to read this series for a little while now and finally got around to it. And they were super cute. I love the covers. I love a witchy rom-com. It's one of my favorite genres ever. Really quick for shimmer, I think I just want to play with that one up there. I feel like that's just a really pretty, like, I don't know, they call it trichromes, I think, from Lethal Cosmetics, and it's just really lovely. So I just want to kind of plaster this everywhere. But the series takes place in the town of Thistle Grove, obviously. It's super cute. They're also all based in various seasons, so I feel like these would be really fun to read during specific seasons, but it doesn't matter to me. But Payback's a Witch is the first one. It takes place through Emmy Harlow's perspective, and it's in peak autumn. Like, this is such an autumnal read, and honestly I'm craving that right now, so I was really happy to read this one. But basically, the town of Thistle Grove was founded upon by 4 witchy families: the Harlows, the Avramovs, the Blackmores, and the Thorns. Can't believe I remembered all that on the top of my head. Probably because I just read it this morning. But it was founded upon by those 4 like founding members, and every 50 years or so there is this big competition to kind of figure out who is going to basically be in charge of everything, so to speak, for that particular generation. And pretty much since the beginning of time, the Blackmores have always reigned supreme. They are the most powerful family and they've just always won. And on top of the fact that maybe them winning every single time isn't fair, it's also just that they're very power hungry, very wealthy, and they're basically taking over the entire town and making it really, really hard for the other witch families to thrive. Also, this town does have like normies, non-magical beings as well, but they don't realize they live in a magical town. There's like spells and glamours to keep their minds not realizing what's going on around them, but yeah, I think that's fun. But basically in this first book, Emmy had actually moved away right after basically high school ended. She got involved with one of the Blackmores, Gareth, and he broke her heart, so she left. She didn't want any part of the town, on top of the fact that like the Harlows were typically seen as like not very powerful. Like the Harlows don't even technically participate in the competition. They're like the arbiters of the competition where they keep the notes and keep the peace and stuff like that. So she just hated the fact that just because of her last name, she was kind of put in this box. So amongst other things, including Gareth breaking her heart, she moves away, and this takes place, I think, like 7 or 8 years down the road. I think she's like 25-ish when she comes back, and she only comes back because she is the firstborn of her particular family for this upcoming competition that she has to be a part of. So she's back in town. She runs into Gareth, who frankly doesn't even recognize her, which is really funny. And then she catches up with some other friends. Her best friend, Lyndon, who is one of the Thorn members, had actually gotten involved with him as well, partly because she got sucked into his charm, but also she thought her best friend was never coming back to town because she hadn't visited once in all these years, so she thought that it would be fine. He ends up breaking her heart because he cheats on her with one of the Avramovs, Talia, and it's just a whole thing. And basically, Talia and Lyndon approach Emmy. They're like, we need to band together and seek revenge on this man. We do not want him to win this year. We want anyone except him to win this year. So the story is basically just following this revenge story. We want to take out the Blackmore dude and see what happens. And on top of that, there is a little romance blossoming between Emmy and Talia. So we have a cute little romance brewing as well, and it was a fun time. Oh, by the way, I don't think I gave you my rating for this one. I feel like I'd give this one also like a solid like 3.5 stars, something like that. Like, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my favorite book of all time. This series in general, I would also probably give like a solid 3.5. I really liked them, but I'm not as obsessed with them as some of the other books I've read. But I did enjoy these, and I also liked them more and more as the books transpired. So that's the general gist of Payback's a Witch. Moving on to the next one, From Bad to Cursed. This takes place the following spring after the previous autumn that this book takes place. And this is through Isadora Avramov's perspective. Izzy is Talia's younger sister, actually. So we know a little bit about her from the first book, but we know much more about her in this book. Basically, there is this big celebration leading up to the upcoming Beltane festivity for the spring, and there is sabotage. One of the Thorn members gets cursed and basically loses her powers. It's this whole big thing, like this is a big deal, and unfortunately, the blame immediately goes to the Avramovs. That particular group, they tend to focus their powers on the undead and interacting with the spirits and messing with ectoplasm and stuff like that. So everyone paints them in a negative light, even though they're not necessarily doing negative things. It's just the stigma, you know? So Isadora wants to clear her family's name. She ends up getting teamed up with one of the other Thorn members, since it's obviously their family that got affected. So she's teamed up with Rowan Thorn, and he is actually the older brother to Lyndon, the best friend of Emmy from the first book. And they very much have an enemies to lovers kind of situation going on, because they had an interaction years prior where she was like freshly 18, volunteering at the animal shelter, and he was like in charge, and basically everything she did couldn't have been more wrong. She felt like she was always picked on and degraded and all these things. So she was not looking forward to having to work with him, but they set aside their differences so they can figure out what to do next. Speaking of what to do next, I feel like I do want to add a little bit of shimmer. I'm going to take the blue shimmer that's on the top of the palette, and I'm just gonna smush a little of it down here just for a little extra twinkle. It's basically this big mystery unfolding, trying to figure out what happened, who caused it, what's the reason, all while their little romance is budding, and it's super cute. And I really liked that one. Honestly, I don't know if I liked this one or the first one more, because I really liked the plot of the first one, but I really like this one too. Maybe I liked the first two pretty equally, but I liked the third one the best for sure. Ooh, that shimmer is so pretty. So that's the general gist of the second one. Takes place in the spring through one of the Avramov's perspectives. And the third one is Back in a Spell. This one takes place the following winter after that previous spring. And this is through one of the Blackmores, which I was actually really excited about, because up until this point, all I've really gotten to know about the Blackmores is that they're rich and powerful and they're taking over the town, and like just not such great things, you know? So I was really excited to get to know things from like the internal perspective. So this takes place through Nina Blackmore's perspective. She is one of the daughters of the current generation of the Blackmores. I think I want kind of like a light neutral lip today. Basically, it starts with her a year after her engagement ending, and she's still kind of dealing with that grief. She's hanging out with her best friend Jess, who is not a magical being. She does not know anything about anything. But Jess is super funny. I really liked her character. But basically, she wants to just set Nina up with someone. She's like, you need to just be with somebody fun, somebody super different than what you would normally go for. Get it out of your system and have a good time with it. Nina ends up reluctantly agreeing, and they go on, I guess, whatever their version of Tinder is. Jess ends up pairing her with Morty, and Morty is so cute. You know a little bit about Morty from the first book, and Morty is just such an angel. Morty is non-binary, but he goes by he, they pronouns in the book, and he says he is what he tends to go for. So I'm gonna use he just for the sake of that, but Morty is just a treasure. I loved him. He is also just a normal, non-magical being, just doing his thing. I need a lip gloss. Hold, please. Morty owns one of the bars in town, and he actually doesn't have a great history with the, it's not really the color I was gonna go for today, but you know what, actually, maybe that's better. He's just dealt with the Blackmores being Blackmores, trying to buy the bar out from under him. All these things are not his favorite people. And they discover that during their first date when they meet up. So it's kind of like an awkward, not so great first date situation. Then flash forward soon after, for some reason, Morty starts developing powers, and it's like, how is this possible? The only way you can have powers is to either be born in one of these magical families or to become a life partner of one of the members that's already magical, and then you start to develop powers on your own in order to be like integrated with the family, so to speak. So it's like, how is this possible? She's also developing all these power surges and all this craziness is happening. So basically the book just ends up being like navigating what is happening with me and my powers, what is happening with you and us, why are we bonded all of a sudden. And it was just really fun going through that story, figuring out what was happening with her personally, and just kind of the relationship between her and Morty. It was just a really fun time to read. And I think this was my favorite of the three. There is a fourth one coming out at some point. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but I'm looking forward to reading that at some point. I imagine that one will take place during one of the Thorn members' perspectives, which I'm excited to hear about because I haven't been in their perspective just yet. Also, there's a third book coming of the Things We Never Got Over. Like, I know I said I have the second and I'm gonna read it, but there is a third coming and I already pre-ordered it because I'm so looking forward to it. But yeah, this is my look. Let me throw on mascara and then we will finish this up. Okay, I'm complete now. Thank you so much for watching. I love how my makeup came out. I feel like this was just so therapeutic to just do my makeup and chat about all the books. I read some really good things. I'm forever obsessed with this one. Things We Never Got Over. It just made my whole life. I'm so excited to start the next one. And yeah, I would just love to hear your thoughts about everything. I feel like this was a good reading month. I have so many things that I'm excited to read next month. I've been building a little collection of things that I intend on reading very soon. I do go on vacation in May, so I have quite the flights ahead. I will share where I'm going very soon, but I have a lot of books that I'm gonna be reading on that trip as well. So I'm just excited to dive into some things, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Have you read any of the books I mentioned today? Are you interested in any of them? What have you been reading lately? I would love to hear down below. If you made it to the end of this video, leave some book emojis. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps my channel out a lot. And if you're not already, you can follow me on my other socials. You can join the battybean fam. I am battybean on everything: Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And if you want, you can subscribe. If you want to see more of my videos, I'm posting most days here as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, bye. Absol, are you at my door crying right now, sir? Even though I'm busy? How rude. Also, I'm sweating to death. I need to turn my air on. You're gonna cry about it. You're gonna have to join us. There we go. What have you read the last month?